Hi there, I'm Pastor Clark with Coffee Creek Church, and I'm so glad that you're joining me for today's final teaching in the Do Good series. Now, we've been working on this series for 3 weeks now, and we've raised a lot of money for the charity called the Spero Project, and you're going to get to hear a lot more about that at the end of our time together today. But first, I wanted to share a few ideas with you about the third concept in this, and that is what it means to love your neighbor as yourself. And that's what we'll spend the majority of our time talking about today. Now, love your neighbor. That's something that, we say a lot and is a common phrase in Christianity. But what does that really look like? It's easy to say until the neighbor's dog is relieving itself in your front yard. And then suddenly it is destroy the neighbor on your HOA Facebook group, right? It's not easy to do always. And so we've heard love your neighbor so much that it kind of becomes a cliche. It kind of comes tired phrase. And we forget the depth behind that phrase and just how difficult it is to do that. Jesus was teaching us about a way to love others that costs us something. It is a sacrificial kind of loving our neighbor as ourselves. Jesus would prove that in his own death on the cross and how sacrificial that death would be. And so when we talk about loving our neighbors ourselves, it is more than just something we can say flippantly. It takes serious dedication. And this is where the do good concept becomes real. We often think of loving your neighbor as one more thing to do. Something on my to-do list. I got to take more stuff and I got to check more things off this list. Bleh. And I don't want to do that because it's exhausting and it can feel really heavy to be. I have a lot of needs and now I have to worry about other people's needs. It can feel unrealistic. Like no one else is doing this. Why should I do this? But if Jesus didn't give it to us as something to do, we would be completely consumed with the self most of the time. And Jesus did not intend for this to be a burden. In fact, there is a positive benefit to you loving other people. It's an invitation to experience the real, true, abundant life that God has in store for you. God himself is a creator and generous, as we mentioned last week. And so for us to experience the fullness of the life that he created for us, we have to be emulating his character. And one of his characteristics is love. He is the definition of love for us. We would not know love if we did not know God and his love towards us. So every time we express love towards others, we were reminded of what God's love feels like for ourselves. And today's scripture I want to talk to you about is this perfect picture of what it means to love like God and to be loved by God. And so this is in Matthew chapter 22. I'm going to read from the New Living Translation version for you. It says, "Teacher, which is the most important commandment in the law of Moses?" And Jesus replied, "You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. This is the first and the greatest commandment. A second is equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself. The entire law and all the demands of the prophets are based on these two commandments." And isn't it interesting that Jesus kind of says, I'm not going to answer the way you want me to answer. You want me to answer what is the greatest. I'm going to give you the two. There's two that are really important here. The second part I think is interesting is that we are taught that whatever the guy is asking or whatever Jesus is telling about this greatest concept, the core concept is love in both of those commandments. The core concept, the core teaching is love. And Jesus wasn't just throwing out random suggestions, right? He wasn't just like, today I think it is. No, he was defining for that time and all of eternity the core of being a Christ follower. And it is this, that you love God, that you love people, and you repeat. That's it. Seems simplistic. I would say it's simple, but not simplistic. It is simple because it's not 50 things. It's not 5 things. It's not even 3 things. It's 2 things. And yet, it's not simplistic because to actually do it, that's a lifelong process. I mean, to actually love others like yourself, to love God with everything you are, that is huge and takes a lot of focus and dedication and removal of all the garbage that gets in the way. And so for you to really do this, it's huge. But it is a simple process. It is a repeatable process. Love God, love dude, love people, love God, do good is what I was going to say there in the second part. Love God, love people, and repeat over and over and over. And the end result is quite interesting. The people that are the target, the neighbors that you are trying to love like yourself, imperfectly as we can, but you're still working on it, they experience love. And the end result for me is that I learn more about God's love. I learn about just how much He has loved me. And when I find it difficult to love other people, all of a sudden I have a sense of maybe I'm difficult to love sometimes. And the more that I love others, and especially people that are not easy to love necessarily, the more I learn about that process. Loving others is good for you. And God wired you to be able to love others. He wired joy and love together in some kind of way that can't be released from each other. I was reading some research that says that loving acts of kindness have been shown to release dopamine. That is a chemical in our brain. And it is one of those chemicals that kind of gives us like a euphoric feeling. It makes us feel good. And so people have called it the helper's high. And it's kind of this feeling of goodness that overcomes us. Some people have called it a warm fuzzy or something like that. But this is why loving acts of kindness towards others makes you feel good. Another researcher said that helping others is believed to increase levels of an endorphin-like chemical in the body, a substance, it's called substance P. And this is one that they're researching for the elderly because they find that elderly people that are like in chronic pain from arthritis or other conditions that are related to their age and aging, they have found higher levels of this substance P in those that volunteer versus those that do not. And in those that volunteer and serve others on a regular basis, they have found decreased chronic pain. So it's good for us. And that's wild. I love what 1 John 4:7 says here. Dear friends, let us love one another, for love comes from God. That is the source once again. Everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. When you love others, you experience God's love in return. And you can't grow closer to God while growing colder towards His creation, His people. So love emanates from God. God is the source of all love in the way that we understand it, the way that we express it. And so the question for you is then, will you let this happen? Will you let God's love flow through you? Will you let it fill you? And then will you allow it to overflow you so that others experience it? And in doing so, you never empty out. You never it's not like I think we think of scarcity of resources a lot, right? And we think, oh no, there's not enough left. And if I give away this love, then God, I'll be left hurting. And no, that's not the way it works. It's an unending supply. I love what Lewis said here. He said, do not waste time bothering whether you love your neighbor. Act as if you did. As soon as we do this, we find one of the great secrets. When you are believing as if you've loved someone, you will presently come to love them. This, I think, answers a key question for me as we talk about this, because I have expressed my own ignorance of the refugee issues in my city, and I'm learning still, and I'm so proud that we partnered with Spero in this, people that are working in that space every day. But I think sometimes even when we know about an issue, right, it doesn't touch everyone in the same way. I know with our homeless work, not everyone is interested in that work. And that's okay. With our next generation work, not everyone is interested. You have large groups that are interested in each one. So with refugee work, you may not fully grasp the depth of it or the level of it or the need or even feel kind of a heartstring being pulled towards it. But here's the thing. We do know we're called to love our neighbor as ourselves. So I think Lewis is trying to say here, this is from Mere Christianity. I think he's trying to say here, you can't manifest love. You can't just be like, I want to love this. That's not going to happen. But what could happen is you don't waste time bothering whether you really love your neighbor yet or not. You start acting like you do. You start following the pattern. And it's similar to the idea that where your treasure is, there your heart is also. So you go ahead and grow through action, not emotion. Start doing the acts of someone that loves their neighbors or stuff, and your feelings will follow. So here's the practice that I want to invite you into this week. And it is one that is threefold, but I think is quite simple. When you wake up, upon waking in the morning, or whenever you get your senses, I know sometimes it takes me a minute to get my senses about me, but whenever you wake up in the morning, pray. And just pray to God quietly. Lord, I'm listening to you. Speak to me. Ask for God's direction in what it would look like for that day for you to love someone, for you to express love towards someone. In the second part, ask Jesus, say, Jesus, who do you want me to see today? Who am I overlooking? Who is right around? Who's right in front of me that I'm just missing? Who do you want me to see today? And then finally, take action. Do a tangible act of love this week. That might be sitting down to coffee with someone. It might be making a phone call. Might be delivering a meal, right? Might be writing a note to someone, but do a tangible act of love. So listen, look, and love. And when you do this, you start to fulfill what we've said is our central scripture for this whole series. And that is this: God made you to do this. God made us to do good. Isn't that beautiful? That he created us not just to exist, not just to eat and to drink, not just to sleep and wake up. He created you, designed you to do good works. So when you do good works, you feel a sense of purpose and accomplishment because that's what you were created to do. It's amazing. And God planned in advance for you to spend your life doing this. That is beautiful. And here's the cool thing. It doesn't benefit just others, just like everything we've talked about in this series. Whether we're talking about serving others, we're talking about giving, or we're talking about today about loving our neighbors ourselves. When you love others, they experience God's love, which is beautiful. But here's the kicker. So do you. You get a sense of the depth and the beauty and the width of God's love. And maybe a little bit of the difficulty of love for us. You'll experience all of that at once. And this is how we practice the way of Jesus. We pay attention to people so they can be seen. We can listen to them so they can be heard and known, and let them know that they are loved by God. What would it look like for you to first of all say, thank you for loving me, God, and respond to that love? I mean, that's the thing. God has bought you this great gift. Imagine this. I'm using an analogy here, but a great gift at Christmas, and he's put it under the tree for you, and it's just sat there forever until you open the gift. The gift is kind of just latent. It's not really doing anything. But then as soon as you open the gift, it's alive and bursting forth into reality for you. So what would it look like for you to say yes to the gift that God has for you? His unbeatable, just completely unknowable love, right? It just overwhelms every part of our life. What would it be like for you to say yes to that love? And then also, if you've already done that, or you just did that, to say yes to reflecting that love, towards being that love and bringing that love into this world so that not only do you experience it, but others around you as well. Now, I want to end with the Spero Project. And I talked at the beginning of this, I said I was going to share a little bit about the Spero Project. And I think it is such a valuable effort and work and ministry. And I want you to know more about it. And so we had a chance to sit down with a couple of the leaders of the organization, and they're going to share with you in just a moment. And before we get there, just a quick mention. We've raised almost $14,000 as of today for the Spero Project. 100% of what we give goes towards that. We're asking full participation. And whether that you're online only with us, or you're someone just catching back up, or you're listening to the podcast this week, or you're watching us online, doesn't matter. We would love it for you to join us. CoffeeCreek.church is how you can give. Click on the give or the do good button. Either one will work. Make sure you click the little box that says do good, and it will go straight towards that. You can see more information on our website, coffeecreek.church, about the Do Good Project, and you can give 24 hours a day. We are giving 100% of what is given throughout this campaign to the Spero Project. And for you to know more about that, here are some leaders talking about the Spero Project.
So grateful for you guys to invite us here today. My name is Kim Bandy. This is Skylar Taylor. And we get the joy to work with the Spero Project, and most importantly with the people that we get to know through that program. I just want to say before we talk about Spero how deeply grateful we are for a community, a faith community like this, to all together dive into a topic like this, but more importantly, to dive into understanding people that have been impacted by this topic. So Pastor Clark and your team, we're so grateful. And because I have a microphone, I'm gonna say, Brianna Carey, if you guys don't know Brianna, who is the connection to Spero from your community, Brianna is who I wanna be when I grow up. She is who I want my kids to be when they grow up, and she follows Jesus into the margins in so many ways and is so smart about it. That's why, anyway. I just want to follow her around. So thank you guys so much for inviting us. So also in the back row are friends that are going to share their story during lunch today about displacement and resettlement, and they're by far the more important people. It's okay, we agree about it. I'm not digging on Skylar here. We agree that they're more important than us. But to set the stage for that, we want to talk a little bit about what the Spero Project does, and a little bit about the program that allowed our neighbors, who you will hear from, to join us here in Oklahoma City. Because I think somebody already this morning said, like, there's a lot of misinformation about this, and so I think it's helpful to give some background and some understanding. So about 18 years ago, my husband, Brad, in the back there, and I were just volunteering with our small group, and through a series of events stumbled into teaching a class in the Burmese community of Oklahoma City, which at the time was maybe like 30 people, and now is thousands and thousands of people from the Burmese community. And what we stumbled upon was that we had moved into a neighborhood, and we were not impressive or missionary. We weren't moving into a neighborhood because there was a community that could use need. We were moving into it because we were newlyweds and poor, and we were wherever we could afford a house. And when my sister came in and looked through the house, she walked through the whole thing and was like, "Oh, back at the beginning already, are we?" Just in case you were wondering about what the house was like. And we, through that process, realized our physical neighbors were people who had been resettled to Oklahoma City. And I'm going to talk about what that means a bit more. But the context of that is the information that comes, I hope comes through the lens of relationship, because that's how the information about resettlement came to us, is that first we met our physical neighbors who were from a country that was experiencing significant challenge and war, and then we met neighbors also from Somalia and Sudan and Iraq and Afghanistan, and they were all places where people had been experienced just really the worst that humanity has to offer. But we encountered this joy and this peace and this expression of trusting in God and following Jesus in a way that wrecked our lives. And we just said, this is what we want our family to be like, and this is what we want our kids to be like. So we connected with relationship, where we said, this is the most incredible community, and we want to learn and be mentored by them. And then through that process, we began to understand the information and the backdrop of what families had experienced. And so that's a bit about what we want to go through today, just to say, if you want to hear from neighbors at the lunch, I think you'll see why we felt it so important to connect and to learn from them and to be mentored by them. And then and this, I hope, is helpful in understanding kind of the background and how they got here. So the next slide is the definition of a refugee. And so this is very important, because this In Oklahoma, we are talking about people who have arrived into Oklahoma City through the Refugee Resettlement Program. And this is a very specific program that Spero gets to partner with, and it's a very specific definition of people. And so the international definition of a refugee is a person who, this is so wordy, owing to a well-founded fear of being persecuted for reasons specifically of race, nationality, and membership of a particular social group or political opinion, is outside of the country of his nationality and is unable or unowing to such fear, unwilling to avail himself of the protection of that country. So it's a super wordy way of saying that someone who is considered a refugee is someone who is so unprotected by or persecuted, particularly by their own country, that it's safer for them to be outside of their country of origin with no status, with no protection, than it is to stay in their home country. Around the world right now, over 120 million forcibly displaced people around the world are looking for a place to be safe. And so it's really important to say that this is primarily women and children, as you see there, almost 50% children, and that this is primarily or almost exclusively civilians. So we're not talking about armed forces here. We're talking about individuals, families that are just living their life, and then they get targeted because they live in a place where there's a crisis, or the government is intentionally trying to cause harm or eradicate specific people groups. For instance, you'll hear from our friend Sung, who is from Burma or Myanmar, and a particular campaign in that country to eradicate minority groups that practice Christianity. And so we're not talking about specific one-off situations, we're talking about entire groups of people that have been forcibly displaced. There's a really moving poem by a British Somali poet, Warsan Shire. Says, the whole poem is worth looking up, it's called Home, but one line that really sticks to me as a mom is, "No one puts their children on a boat unless the water is safer than the land." So we really are talking about people who have met this definition of well-founded fear for their life, not for their livelihood, but for their actual physical life. You can see this image here with the raft is really moving to me because that's how so many people flee. There's this next slide will show you an image that you may be familiar with from recent news stories, that there was a large amount of people in Afghanistan who had to flee for safety as the Taliban took over, but right now there are many, many, many individuals still trying to get through from Afghanistan that need to get to safety, and they meet that definition. Then the next kind of piece of the refugee journey that has to be true is that refugees then, if they flee their home country and they must leave and avail themselves of another of the UN saying, "Please protect me," then they will live in limbo. And that means they'll live in a refugee camp or in a migrant community. And that'll be part of also the stories you'll hear this afternoon. Refugee camps were designed to be temporary solutions. So if you picture there was a large scale war, people fled, and countries just needed to figure out what to do with a large group of people. And then they thought, let's set this up for the next month or two, something that will work for the next month or two. That's what is now set up for families who are living there. The average stay, actually, let me show this next slide. This is the Dadaab refugee camp in Kenya. It's one of the largest. This camp was built in the 80s, and it is the same camp that has been standing during that whole time. We're now in fourth generation of families who had to flee, and they're living in that camp. So if you picture that infrastructure, there's no medical, the sewage, all of the things, the infrastructure that was set up for a temporary is actually where people are living the rest of their lives, having children, raising families, because there isn't a solution for them. So once those individuals move into the temporary camps, then they are able to register, or before they move into the camps, they register with the UN and say, I have met this definition of a refugee. So they are asking to move into a safe place like the United States. So no one in the refugee resettlement program is able to just join us in the United States and then say, I'm a refugee. There are different programs that allow for something similar, but we're talking about the refugee resettlement program. And our neighbors coming through that program have all said to the UN, the United Nations, I need to go somewhere safe. And then they don't get to choose where that is. It may be Australia or New Zealand or some of the other countries in the world that will resettle, but the United States is one of those. And every year the United States says how many people we think we are willing to receive through the Refugee Resettlement Program. And we will, and then the UN will just also decide if people can be referred to those countries. And on this next slide, you'll see that of those 120 million forcibly displaced people, less than half of 1% will ever be resettled into a third-party country, like the United States. So not in Oklahoma, not in Oklahoma City, but anywhere in the world. And that is not because those people don't pass the very rigorous vetting that determines if they're safe and that they can come, because there is very rigorous vetting. That is based on the number of people that the countries all together say that they will resettle into their country. So it's a combination of Norway and Sweden and Australia and the United States. And so when our number goes down, there's less people that get a chance to arrive through a program. That program then allows for those individuals to arrive, and then that's where Spero gets to jump in and be really honored to say, we will find out a family has come, often after 17, 18, over 20 years of waiting. Not always that long, but that's the story for many people we know. And we are able to provide them through the Refugee Resettlement Program, individuals get less than $2,000 each of welcome money. That has to go towards housing and food. And so there isn't specific housing. So if it's a family of 3, we have less than $6,000 to say, let's find you an apartment, put a deposit down, get your utilities on, get everything in that apartment set up. And then families which is why families then must get a job right away, because they begin owing right away. The United States is the only country that does this, but families land owing back a non-interest loan for their plane ticket. So Brad and I had some neighbors that moved in across the street from us, a family of 7, originally from Sudan, had been displaced. They were living in Cairo, Egypt, in a refugee community. So they landed in Oklahoma City at the Will Rogers World International Airport, owing back 7 international tickets from Cairo to Oklahoma City. And families happily do it, and they're very willing to do that. But I think sometimes one of the myths is that there is lavish resource for this community, and that's actually not true at all. Community buys in right away and is very grateful to do it. And so we get to walk alongside these neighbors. And as I've said, they have taught us so much about life and family and faith and what we want our lives to look like. And so we get to ask them really serious questions like, how did you parent? What do you think is important? What does following God look like to you? And then we get to answer questions like, what is that siren on Saturday at noon? And when this note comes home from my school from the teacher, is it saying that my kid is having trouble, or is it saying wear purple on Friday? And all of those questions are the types of questions that neighbors have as they arrive. There's the big questions of like, can I find a job, and how do I learn English? But really, it's the day-to-day questions that make someone feel safe and secure. And so that's what Spero gets to do. Skylar's going to talk more about the function of how we get to walk alongside neighbors. But I think what's so important to say is it's through the lens of relationship, because as you'll hear, our neighbors have taught us what it looks like to live in strength and community. And if all of us could look like how our neighbors look in living together, we would be a beautiful place to live. And so thank you again for letting us join. I'm going to hand off to Skylar to talk a little bit about what Spero functionally does. And thank you for your support in that.
Thank you so much. So if we go to the next slide, you guys can see a little bit of the different types of programs that we provide at Spero to support adults. We get the opportunity to have adult education. So as you can imagine, when you are brought into a new space, one of the most important things right off the bat is to learn English. So last year alone, we were able to teach over 1,200 classes throughout the year. Our classes are free for neighbors. We offer childcare during classes so that mothers can can come and they don't have any barriers. Transportation's not a barrier. We have our classes on site within the communities that people live in. And if someone does live too far, we'll provide that transportation. So we want to make sure that our programming is accessible as possible for our neighbors. We do provide employment support. So right off the bat, we have a team that works with neighbors in order to ensure that they can work on any of those types of things that you need when finding a job. So resume building, what kinds of skills did you come with? And then providing that help and support along the way. Last year, we were able to partner with almost 500 neighbors in getting jobs, and that's been really crucial for helping families really get off with their footing here in Oklahoma. Medical navigation is also a really key component of what we get to offer. So we've gotten to teach pregnancy classes. We help provide translation in healthcare settings, help understand sooner care and how to book an appointment on all of those things that are really confusing if you've lived here your whole life, let alone if you're brand new to the country and learning English at the same time. And then our basis is with our community navigation. So that's like a case manager. So really walking alongside neighbors for all of those questions in between, helping set up your bank, helping figure out how to pay rent, and like Kim was saying, all of those questions that a program doesn't necessarily fulfill, but are just as critical in feeling welcome and safe and understanding what is going on while you're here. Another big thing on our next slide that we get to do is help support. We can skip to the next one. We can help support our youth. So there are over 1,800 kids that are here in Oklahoma City and surrounding areas like Edmond as well. So we get to provide after-school programming. We get to provide youth mentoring. And we know that this age, especially for youth mentoring, that, like 12 to 20-year age range, those are the individuals in the community that families are leaning on heavily. It's easier to acquire language in this age range, and it is crucial that they get that extra layer of support as well. We get to connect with school systems and act as liaisons to make sure that parents have that relationships with teachers or schools and help understanding what's going on with their kids as well. We get to do really fun summer programs. So if we move on to the next, we get to also partner with refugee community leaders. So just a couple weekends ago, Sung got to help set up this really great soccer tournament with the Burmese community, and their church had these amazing, we were laughing saying that concessions at like our baseball games are like hot dogs and stuff, and they had this really cool spread of Burmese food, and that's the ideal for me, is to show up somewhere like that. But so just really getting to partner with community leaders and say like, hey, how can we support you, right? We're not coming in with all the answers. We're coming in to be a connector and to continue to build community with one another. So we get to do so many different things at Spero, but at the base of it all, it's how can we walk alongside neighbors, make them feel welcome, because we know we're also learning just as much in return, and getting to work together and be partners and build the community here in Oklahoma is really just such a special opportunity for us. So thank you, guys.